Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you, and thank you for watching. This is part 2 of my refutation of Abdullah Samir with regards to the video that he titled The Terrible Deal That Aisha Got. This is also part 6 of my refutation of David Wood with regards to the multiple videos that he made criticizing and mocking Prophet Muhammad for his marriage from Aisha. Please refer to the part 1 of my refutation of Abdullah Samir, and please refer to parts 1 to 5 of my refutation of David Wood. Now, I concluded my last video refuting Abdullah Samir with making a point that it is just fair to allow Aisha to speak for herself and describe the nature of her life with the Prophet Muhammad, instead of us accepting the lies and fabrications made by Abdullah Samir, David Wood, apostate prophet, and other haters of the Prophet Muhammad, who depict Aisha as having the most terrible and miserable life any woman can have. Also, David Wood gives this very disgusting and filthy image where he describes the night of consummation of marriage between the Prophet Muhammad and Aisha. He makes up a story and he brings up a figment of his own imagination. Basically, he makes up a horror story that he says, imagine this young girl who was taken and she didn't know where they were taking her. She had no idea about what marriage was or what an intimate relationship or a sexual relationship between a husband and wife was about. And then he describes in a very vulgar way, and he says, imagine this 50-some-year-old man forcing his penis into the vagina of this little girl with blood splashing all over the bed and with her screaming in pain, and that he has scarred her for life. Now, I asked David Wood, we are dealing with a historical event here. So when you are dealing with a historical event, it just makes sense that you provide references, historical references, for the information that you are providing for your viewers. So I challenged David Wood and I asked him, that horrible image and that horror story that he provides to his viewers, where did he get it from? What is the reference? I challenged David Wood to find any source, whether Islamic or non-Islamic, whether authentic or even fabricated, that describes the night of consummation of marriage between Prophet Muhammad and his wife Aisha in that horrible way. And then we ask David Wood, Abdullah Samir, and their viewers, who is a more reliable source with regards to the historical events that occurred during the life of the Prophet and that occurred to Aisha? Should we accept information from the first-hand person who is Aisha, who lived these events, or should we resort to fabrication and lies from people who lived more than 1400 years past these events? Anyone who respects his mind and respects the intelligence and intellect of his viewers would use the sound historical methods in critiquing historical sources. And the basic criteria for accepting a historical source is that a primary source is much more reliable than a secondary source, and a first-hand source is much more reliable than a second-hand source. And even when they come to the primary source, they try to analyze that source and determine whether that source or that historical report was created during the time of the events or sometime after. Then they say, does that historical report show consistency or discrepancy when compared to other reports that describe the same event? Is that historical report corroborated by other sources? And so on. Both guys and other haters of the Prophet Muhammad, Abdullah Samir, David Wood, apostate prophet, and others, do not follow any of the scientific criteria or historical source criticism criteria with regards to the information that they are providing for their viewers. Neither Abdullah Samir or David Wood or other people who hate the Prophet Muhammad have any legitimate right to speak on behalf of Aisha and provide their own narrative and version of the story when they did not witness these events, and when their narrative totally contradicts the multiple and numerous reports made by Aisha herself and made by the people who lived with Aisha at her time. We have numerous historical reports in the compilations of the tradition of the Prophet Muhammad and the tradition of his companions, and the life story of Prophet Muhammad and the life story of his companions and his wives. We have numerous historical reports that these guys choose to totally ignore and never mention to their viewers. All they take is that Aisha was 9 years old, then they start making these horror stories and start adding their own fabrications in order to provide and give a horrible image about the Prophet Muhammad and about this whole marriage. Of course, this is a logical fallacy that is labeled as appeal to emotion and appeal to pity. They are not using the sound methods of critical thinking and sound logic in handling this matter, but they know that if they make up a story that shows this young girl going through this pain or going through this shock, which actually never happened, they think if they make up a story like this, they can convince their viewers that this marriage was a horrible thing and that Prophet Muhammad was immoral and so on. If you refer to the previous videos that I've made, they show clearly that the age discrepancy between a husband and wife was the norm in the past, and that the age of marriage of the bride was usually very young in all civilizations and societies in history throughout the world. An example of this is the fact that Prophet Muhammad's daughter herself was married to a man by name of Utbah ibn Abi Lahab when she was 10 years old, before Prophet Muhammad became a prophet. So this was a tradition of the people even before Islam. A man by the name of Huyay ibn Akhtab, who was the leader of a Jewish tribe in Medina, he gave his daughter Safiya, the daughter of Huyay ibn Akhtab, in marriage when she was 10 years old as well. This was just the norm at the time. Aisha herself was engaged to a man by the name of Jubair ibn Mut'im before she was even engaged to Prophet Muhammad. And this shows that her family and the family of the man who engaged her and the community in general felt that she was ready for marriage. That engagement fell apart and did not continue because of the fact that Aisha and her family embraced Islam and Jubair ibn Mut'im remained as a pagan. So his family was worried that she may influence him. And that is when another lady by the name of Khawla bint al-Hakam, she sought for other grooms for Aisha when that engagement fell apart. And she was the one who suggested her to Prophet Muhammad. And at the same time, and coinciding with that, Prophet Muhammad had a vision in which Jibreel, the angel Jibreel, showed him an image of a woman behind the veil, that this will be his wife, and then he lifted the veil and it was Aisha. Anyhow, this is how the events went, but the fact that she was so young, or the fact that there was a big age discrepancy between her and the Prophet, was the norm in that society, as I showed in previous videos. So let's allow Aisha herself to speak of her life with the Prophet Muhammad. Was it a miserable life? Was she scarred for life? Did she go through a huge shock and enormous pain? If this was the fact, then let's see what she says about this marriage. Uh, Before I go into the reports made by Aisha about her own marriage, I'd like to mention that both Apostate Prophet David Wood, Abdullah Samir, they all use certain parts of the narration that describes her marriage, such as the parts that talk about her playing with dolls or having girlfriends playing with her. They use this as a sign that she was immature. Now, if this was a sign, having dolls or stuffy toys, stuffy animals, or playing with girlfriends, if these were signs of immaturity, then if you apply these signs to girls in their late teens and ladies in their 20s and even early 30s, nowadays, then you would have to claim that half of those girls and 20-year-olds and early 30-year-olds are immature, because playing with dolls is something that is common in older teenagers. It is actually even still common to have stuffy animals and dolls for girls in their 20s and so on. And even having girlfriends coming over and playing, this is not per se a sign of immaturity. This is another logical fallacy that it's called the non sequitur, which means it does not follow. These are not signs of immaturity. The fact that Aisha narrated more than 2,210 hadiths during her 9 years of life with the Prophet Muhammad it shows us how mentally and cognitively mature she was. If you read the hadith, the historical report on how Aisha handled the incident of slander, where she was slandered, and this happened shortly after her marriage, maybe within a year or two after her marriage, she handled it with all patience, wisdom, and steadfastness, more than in such a way that is better than most women would, older women would handle it nowadays. If you look at that incident and how she managed to be patient, and how she was so wise and so reasonable and so strong, this would vouch for her emotional and psychological maturity. The fact that she was engaged before the Prophet Muhammad, and the fact that she says, as narrated in Sunan al-Tirmidhi, that if a girl reaches 9 years old, she is a woman, and the fact that the Prophet Muhammad actually waited for 2 to 3 years after the verbal marriage contract was made between him and her father, he waited for that time before he consummated the marriage, shows that there was a reason for that waiting period, which is for Aisha to become physically mature in the form of being post-pubertal, to become mentally and psychologically mature. But these guys ignore all these historical facts and start making up their own stories. Aisha says, as reported in Sunan Abu Dawood, this is the hadith number 2578. She says, I was with the Messenger of Allah on a journey, and we raced. And I came first. Thereafter, Aisha says, I gained some weight. And he raced me in a different incident and different journey. And he raced me, and this time he came first. He then said, now the score is settled. This shows you how much fun they had together and how much happiness they were immersed in this life. And that Prophet Muhammad understood that for her young age, she needed her husband to perform such activities with her. And he would take his time out of all the duties that he had with regards to teaching the people, with regards to worship, with regards to fasting, praying, reading the Quran, solving people's problems. He would take the time to enjoy his life with Aisha in such a way. From the romantic standpoint, from the romantic point of view, there's a narration in Sahih al-Bukhari, the authentic book of Bukhari, the chapter of bathing, hadith number 2061, in which Aisha herself reports, he says, the Prophet and I used to take a bath from a single pot after janabah, which means after sexual intercourse. And our hands would alternate in the pot. And then they would actually tease each other, and he would say to her, oh Aisha, leave some water for me. And she would say to him, leave some water for me. These romantic moments speak of how much love they had between them and how much mature Aisha was. It is also narrated in the authentic book of Bukhari, hadith number 298, that Prophet Muhammad used to, when he was in the mosque, because her room, the door of her room would open directly to the mosque. So Prophet Muhammad would be in the mosque sitting, and he would put his head backwards into her room, just through the door, and she would comb his hair. Sometimes Prophet Muhammad would like to stay in seclusion to worship God while in the mosque and would not want to leave, especially in Ramadan. So to have her comb his hair, he would do that. Also, Prophet Muhammad would go the distance to make Aisha happy and satisfy her emotionally. One time they were on a journey, and Aisha's necklace, she dropped her necklace. It broke off and it dropped. So there was a big caravan, and the Prophet Muhammad asked for the whole caravan to camp in that spot to look for Aisha's necklace. Imagine that, possibly 1,000 or 2,000 people having to camp in one place to look for his wife's necklace. And that was narrated in the authentic book of Bukhari, hadith number 330. They used to watch entertainers together, because sometimes some entertainers would come in the mosque and show their skills with throwing spears or throwing arrows inside the mosque. And Aisha says in hadith number 445 in the authentic book of Bukhari that Prophet Muhammad would stand in front of her to shield her, and then she would look over his shoulder to watch these entertainers. So is this a miserable life, Abdullah Samir? And David Wood, is this a description of a life of a woman who was scarred for life after she went this terrible deflowering when this 50-some-year-old man forced his penis into her vagina and blood was all over the bed, as you describe it in such a vulgar way in your videos, and it's only a fabrication and a figment of your imagination. Prophet Muhammad also stood up for Aisha when anyone wanted or tried to deceive her. And there was one time Aisha freed a slave girl, and normally when somebody freed a slave, the allegiance of that slave, and that includes inheritance, should that slave die one day, the inheritance rights would go to the one who freed the slave. And this is according to the Islamic law. So one time she freed a slave, and the people who owned that slave before she freed her claimed that, no, if that slave girl dies one day, we are the ones who would inherit her, which is totally against the Islamic law. Prophet Muhammad stood up for her, and he gave a sermon reiterating this part of the Islamic law, and he basically criticized these people for trying to distort the law. This is mentioned also in the authentic book of Bukhari, hadith number 446. Prophet Muhammad used to worship a lot at night, and he did not require of Aisha to do anything close to what he used to do. Also in the book of Bukhari, hadith number 492 and 491, it showed that Allah's Messenger would pray for most of the night, while Aisha would either be sleeping across in front of him, or sometimes she would just be sitting, and her legs would be she would have her legs with her feet facing him. But then when he wanted to make prostration, he would basically touch her legs like this, her feet, so that she withdraws her legs away so that he can prostrate to his God. Also, Prophet Muhammad had a very special emotional and romantic connection with Aisha. When he got seriously ill, um, just before his death, he asked for permission from his other wives to stay in Aisha's house because he did not have the energy to go from one house to the other. So he asked permission from his wives to stay his last days in Aisha's house. This is mentioned in Book of Bukhari, hadith number 634. This shows you how much love he had towards Aisha and how much love she had towards him. And she is the one who describes the last moments before his death. And she describes how she took the toothbrush and she chewed it to make it soft for the Prophet, because when he tried to brush his teeth with it, it was harsh on his gums. So she chewed it and had her saliva on it, and then he basically brushed his teeth. Aisha considered this a blessing from God. She says, I was blessed from God that my saliva was the last saliva to mix with the Prophet's saliva, and that he died on my arms, on my chest. This is how she describes her love for the Prophet till the last moment. And even before Prophet Muhammad asked his wives for permission to stay in Aisha's house for his last days, he would, because he had 9 wives at the time of his death, every day he would ask, where am I today, asking in which house he should be, because he followed the rules. He followed the rules that each wife has her right for her to stay one day, then he would go to this following one, then he would go to the following one. And he would be asking because he is yearning and looking forward for the day of Aisha, and all his wives knew that because of how much love they had between them. Also, Prophet Muhammad, sometimes before he went out for prayer, he would kiss Aisha. And that is also mentioned in authentic narrations. It is mentioned in Sunan al-Tirmidhi, hadith number 86. The Prophet Muhammad used to kiss me before he went out for prayer. Now, such romantic interaction between the Prophet Muhammad and his wife Aisha, many men living today are lacking such a relationship with their wives. And then these people, such as Abdullah Samir, David Wood, and Apostate Prophet, and others, have the audacity to come and describe Aisha's life as miserable, terrible, and that she hated her life with the Prophet Muhammad. Prophet Muhammad used to help Aisha with her house chores, and he used to help all his wives. This is mentioned in Book of Bukhari, hadith number 676. Also, on the authority of Aisha, in Book of Muslim, in authentic Book of Muslim, hadith number 2328, she says, Allah's Messenger never laid a hand on anyone, never hit anyone, neither a woman or a servant. And this refutes the false claims made by haters of Islam and haters of the Prophet Muhammad, who say that Prophet Muhammad punched Aisha one day on her chest. And I heard David Wood making that false claim. He was citing a hadith in authentic Book of Muslim from the same book I just cited Aisha's report from. So in that same book, I just cited to you the hadith number 2328, where she says Prophet Muhammad never laid a hand, never hit anyone, neither a woman or a servant or anyone else. While David Wood cites a hadith that is numbered 2127 in the same book, in which Aisha says Prophet Muhammad, one time he just like any husband and wife can go into an argument. So Prophet Muhammad was pointing his finger like this at her, and he pointed his finger at her chest. And she says, he pointed his finger at my chest and pressed down, and it hurt me. That's all she says. Now, how did David Wood interpret that? He says, yes, that's what David Wood says. He says, I have the right to mock Muhammad because he punched Aisha in her chest. Now, where did he get the word punch from? The Arabic word that Aisha used was lahadani. And if he goes to the Arabic dictionary, Lisan al-Arab, volume 3, page number 393, lahada means to press with the finger. That's all he did. This is the maximum the Prophet Muhammad did when he was actually angry with Aisha and arguing with her. Imagine this. David Wood lies to his viewers and says that he punched her in her chest. These people basically are incapable of saying the truth. They are incapable of giving people the right image, the full truth and nothing but the truth. They are incapable of doing that. Even when they quote an authentic narration, they fail to understand it in the right way, or they deliberately misunderstand it and misrepresent it to their viewers. And this is just an example, as we were just discussing some other issue that came along. Prophet Muhammad had such very strong romantic gestures to Aisha, as mentioned in the authentic book of Muslim, hadith number 590. She says, whenever I used to drink from a vessel, from a cup or something like this, Prophet Muhammad would then drink after me from that same vessel, and he would deliberately place his mouth in the same point I placed my mouth. And then she says, even when I used to eat from some flesh off a bone, Prophet Muhammad would deliberately eat from that same point I was eating from. Now, how much more romantic can a husband be with his wife than Prophet Muhammad was with Aisha? Aisha herself used to love the Prophet Muhammad so much that she would get so angry when she even felt the hint of an insult towards the Prophet Muhammad. I would mention a hadith to you. This is hadith number 53 in the Sahih book of Bukhari, the authentic book of Bukhari, in the book of manners. It's hadith number 53 in the book of manners. She says, once a group of men entered upon the Prophet Muhammad, and they said, instead of saying Assalamu alaikum, they said Assalamu alaikum. Now, Arabic language is so specific. If you take that L out, that lam out, instead of Assalamu alaikum, meaning that peace be upon you, Assalamu alaikum without that L, without that lam, becomes death be upon you. It basically changes the meaning totally to the exact opposite. Aisha understood what they said, so she got so angry, she immediately responded. And she said, in defense of the Prophet, she said, may the death and curse of Allah be upon you towards these people. Thereupon the Prophet Muhammad tried to calm her down and said to her, calm down, O Aisha. Allah loves that one should be kind and lenient in all matters. Look at how polite the Prophet is, and those liars keep on insulting him and mocking him. Even when people criticized him so much, even when people insulted him and wished him death, and his wife was defending him, he asked her to calm down and not to reciprocate this kind of statement towards them. And he said that God loves a person to be lenient and kind in all matters. Even Prophet Muhammad, Aisha sometimes used to get angry towards him, and he would show so much tolerance towards her. One time, another wife of the Prophet Muhammad by the name of Salama sent some food to the Prophet while he was in the house of Aisha. So Aisha felt offended. She got very jealous. She basically hit that plate, and everything fell off of it, and the plate split in half. The Prophet Muhammad himself went down and collected the food and put the plate together as much as he could. And there were guests at his house at the time. He was laughing and joking about it. He says, eat, O my guests, your mother means Aisha, because she is labeled as, and all his wives are called the mothers of the believers. He says, eat, O my guests, your mother Aisha had a tantrum of jealousy. This is in Sunan al-Nasa'i, the book of al-Nasa'i, the compilation of Nasa'i, hadith number 3956. Prophet Muhammad used to even joke with Aisha about her anger. In book of Bukhari, the book of manners, hadith number 101, Allah's messenger said to Aisha one day, O Aisha, I know when you are angry with me and when you are pleased with me. She said to him, how come? How are you able to tell when I'm angry with you? And how are you able to tell when I'm pleased with you? He says, when you are pleased with me and then you want to make an oath, you say, yes, by the Lord of Muhammad. But then when you are angry with me and you want to make an oath, you say, no, by the Lord of Abraham. She avoids saying his name at the time. Finally, I will conclude with this final narration. It is also in the authentic book of Bukhari, hadith number 5189. This describes an incident where 11 women came in and sat in the house of Aisha. And they were describing their lives with their husbands. Each one, they basically sat together and said, we will be very honest and open about our relationships with our husbands. They're not talking about their sexual relationships, but about how their husbands treat them in general. Are they generous? Are they kind? Are they generous? Are they kind to them? Are they harsh? And so on. So the 10 women spoke, and then the 11th woman, it came the turn for that 11th woman to speak. That 11th woman said, my husband, his name is Abu Zara. And she said, and what is Abu Zara? Or who is Abu Zara? What should I say about him? She says, he has given me many ornaments, and my ears are heavily loaded with them, which means he gives her lots of jewelry and gold. And my ears are heavily loaded with them. And my arms have become fat, which means that he provides for me so much food that I've gained weight. My arms have become fat. And he has pleased me, and I have become so happy that I feel proud of myself. This is what this 11th woman is saying. And then she goes on. She says, he found me with my family who were mere owners of sheep and living in poverty, and brought me to a respected family, which means his family is a very high-ranking family. He brought me to a respected family having horses and camels and threshing and purifying grain. And then she says, whatever I say, he does not rebuke me or insult me. So her husband is very tolerant and lenient and kind. Whatever I say, he does not rebuke me or insult me. When I sleep till late in the morning. He doesn't require for her to get up and work or do any chores for him. When I sleep, I still till late in the morning. And when I drink water or milk, I drink my fill. He was one of the kindest husbands out of the 11 women who were describing their husbands. Thereupon, Prophet asked Aisha, he asked her, am I to you just like Abu Zara is to his wife? He's asking her a question. Then Aisha replied, may my father and mother be sacrificed for you, O Messenger of Allah. You are better than him. This is in Sahih al-Bukhari. Now, I think these clear historical reports, and they are all authentic. I have only included authentic, documented, truthful historical reports here, from the same books that these guys are trying to quote from to deliver a horrible and bad image about the Prophet Muhammad. These guys deliberately ignore all these reports, and they deliberately fail to mention them to their viewers because these reports do not serve their purpose. They have one goal only. That goal is to depict the Prophet Muhammad in the most disgusting and repugnant image. That's what their goal is. So they would use any tactic, any lie, any deception, any form of deliberate ignorance of other reports that show the real picture. So this is like somebody who wants to if you really want to have a full image and a full picture of any sort, it is like collecting parts of a jigsaw or a puzzle. You have to get all the parts together to see the full image and the full picture. But if somebody picks one part of this jigsaw or puzzle and tries to tell you that this is the whole picture, then it would not make any sense to you. Now I'm giving you the other reports about Aisha's marriage from the same books. These guys took the one kind of report that talks about just her age. They just talked about her age, and then they started fabricating and making these horror stories about this marriage. And they deliberately avoided these other reports. This is another pseudological fallacy. It's a trick. It's a mind game to trick and deceive the audience and viewers in order to make them hate the Prophet Muhammad. Because these people like David Wood, Abdullah Samir, Apostle Prophet and others, they hate the Prophet so much they cannot accept the fact that he was such a kind and loving husband. And they hate Islam so much that they feel so frustrated that Islam has so much appeal to the public. So instead of trying to logically refute any of the tenets of Islam, they direct their attack to the personal life of the Prophet Muhammad. And actually, the personal life of the Prophet Muhammad is such a clean and honorable life if they would only give you the whole picture, but they deliberately avoid doing so. Thank you for watching, and this series will continue because I still need to speak in more detail about the age of marriage in Islam, and I will be commenting on some of the verses that David Wood quoted in some of his videos, claiming that Islam allows for marriage from prepubertal girls, and this is basically a lie. I will show that in all detail in upcoming videos. Thank you for watching.